Hello, hello. Just sorting out some technical stuff here, guys. Can you guys hear me? I cannot tell if the audio is working, so I will rely on you guys. Is the chat working? I see nobody. Somebody's here. All right. It is an HD6, yes. Does the sound work? Today is like the most technical difficulties day I've had in a long time. Specifically because there's been some sort of earthworks construction stuff going on in this building, and so my internet has gone down and come back multiple times, meaning that I have no idea if this is going to work. It could just shut off, in the middle of it. If that does happen, I will try and get it back. But if for whatever reason I'm not able to make the stream happen, I'll try and do it tomorrow. But yeah, we'll try. Everything seems normal. Okay. The other thing I want to draw your guys' attention to is this picture behind me. Let me get out of the frame. Check that out. Is that gonna... No, it's not gonna focus on it. Okay, what if I do this? There. Look at how dope that is. And yes, I am aware that it looks crooked, but it's because the camera is crooked. And it's also at an angle. So that picture is from Goldentown. He sent that over, and there's a funny story around that. So when we were in Munich, at the high end show, we went to the Western Electric room or booth or whatever you want to call that. They had their speakers set up, and the speakers were awesome. But I was looking around the room and they had that picture there, kind of like, I think it was a smaller version of that, and they had it there, and I thought it was hilarious, and so we were sort of admiring the picture, and he noticed that, and then sent it. He got one printed out basically and sent to me, and I think maybe he sent one to DMS as well. I'm not sure. But yeah, we all loved the picture, and so it was very kind of him to get that done for us and send it over. So big thanks to Golden. Everybody who isn't aware of Golden, go check out his stuff. It's Golden Sound. I think that's his YouTube and Golden's website as well. So, and actually, I'm gonna say, for all of you guys who are interested in like DACs and amps and all that kind of stuff, check out his channel and like what he's like, his coverage, because he actually has the tools to measure that. We're working on figuring that out for ourselves as well, but he's set up to do that, and also he gives great coverage. So check out his stuff. Cheers to tubes. Yeah. I think, yeah. Other than that, we can launch right into the Saturday usual live Q&A session. And as usual, there are links in the description if you guys want any of the measurement information. Also, my ranking list is in there, so if you have like purchase advice questions, check the ranking list first, because that's probably where it'll probably answer what I would say in most cases. And then also, if you are interested in any of the reviews, the written reviews that we do, those are up on headphones.com as well, so there's links in the description for that. Otherwise, let's dive right into the live Q&A. How's everyone doing this Saturday? Good evening from Germany. Hi from Munich. I got the German folks in here today. It's good to see you guys. Let me just make sure I'm not clipping here. No, not that. No, not that. There we go. That's maybe a bit aggressive. There we go. Goldentown's one of my favorite reviewers. Glad that he's really stand-up dude. Yes, he was one of the coolest people to hang out with in person. Very well spoken, and just like a nice, chill dude in general. How soon is the new Meze coming out? I don't know. They said like a few months. I think they're hoping for this year. So maybe like in the fall, but that's total speculation guess on my part. Hey, what's up, Hearty? I don't know how. I never know how to say your name. Heartio. Is that what they call tubism? It's so cool. It's like people holding 300B tubes as if they're cheersing with them. I think that's dope. That's awesome. Um, this could be louder. Just turn your volume up. I don't want a clip. See there? Then that just made a clip. I have a question. Does anyone have any recommendations for Bluetooth headphone with ANC and over ear? I see always the Sony XM4, Bose, and Sennheiser. All right, so the one of the best sounding ones is that's also cheap is the Final Audio UX 3000. So I have a review of that one that I'll put out soon. But in short, that's the one that the communities, myself included, are talking about right now. Because yeah, I mean the sound quality is vastly superior to that of the XM4. Also consider the Sennheiser Momentum 3. Also consider the PXE 550 Mark II, although that one has a bit stronger clamp, which is less ideal and a bit spicier in the treble. But the technical capabilities are also far superior than Bose and Sony and Apple. So yeah. Are wireless IEMs, true wireless, getting close to wired for IEMs? I have heard some that are close in some respects. For tonal balance, yeah, they've got that figured out, but it's nowhere near on the same level of technical capability, which some people don't even think is a thing, but it is a thing. Yeah, the ones that I've heard that are close for some of the other stuff, they are also not ANC. So I haven't heard any ANCs yet that that are close. I think the one to consider there would be the Final Audio. They have there's not the not the 3000, but I think there's a new one that they're coming out with soon that looks pretty interesting. So I'll try that one out. But yeah. Hearty U. Okay. I'll try and remember that. Do you think the Rebel amp is fine on all day, being Class A? Oh, I mean, it'll get hot. I mean, I generally am not a fan of leaving stuff on all day if possible. Is this really dark for you guys? Like, I can't. Let me just. Maybe we'll go with this. We'll clip a little bit. Highlights. Not everything needs to be as dark as my soul. All right. Phonitor XE with LCD3, good pairing. I don't know anything. I know very little about the LCD3. It's not one that I've had the chance to get in and review and try off different sources, so I can't really answer that. But I would expect so. What's your favorite music to test with? So, being a reviewer means that I have to test with like all kinds of different genres. Like I can't just go with the stuff that I like. But with that said, the genres that I prefer, I have two genres. Like I really like jazz and like music with instruments. Jazz and I wouldn't say like classical, like typical classical, but like I like flamenco and stuff like that, or stuff that is probably within that category of instrumental. And then I also like some certain types of metal, but most metal I think is crap. But But yeah, I do have to listen to a lot of stuff. Like I listen to electronic music as well, to see how something sounds with electronic music, right? I'm really not into rap and hip hop. Those are the two genres that I try and stay away from personally, um, as much as I can. But it's fine if you like those genres. The audiophiles are not genre specific. I've found there's people who they're super into rap and hip hop and they want it to sound as best as it possibly can. I think maybe that falls apart when you start talking about like black metal and stuff like that. But yeah. Flight testing on N700. Um, I do think it's important to do flight testing for ANC headphones. It's just you don't always have the opportunity to do so. So, I would say most ANC headphone reviews, including mine, take them with a grain of salt if they haven't been flight tested, because it is a different experience when you're on an airplane, or if you're even just wearing headphones for 8 hours at a time or whatever, right? Um, what's the next step up in resolution after the HD650? That is a similar sound signature. Resolution. All right. Yeah. So I think it depends on what you consider the defining characteristics of the HD650. If you consider the warmer, like mid to upper bass bloom of the HD650 its defining characteristic, that's going to be a different answer than if you think the mid-range swell at around like 1.5k or whatever, or 1k, 1.5, something like that, is its defining characteristic, which is also different from if you consider the friggin' what's the roll, the not roll, the relaxed, the subdued mid treble, right? The smooth treble, a defining characteristic. So you could have a different answer depending on what you consider to be the most valuable there. I will say, in my view, I actually think that the treble is its best quality for that smooth, relaxed thing, for people looking for that. And if you are looking for that, I would actually suggest, there's a bunch of, I think there's a bunch of suggestions, but I would probably lean towards something like that DCA Aeon X Open. I mean, I don't know, I wouldn't necessarily say it's like better, but it is better at certain things, right? Because and it retains that quality. But if you're asking like what is overall the most straightforward upgrade to the HD650, like just across the board, that is the Headphone Sundara and an amplifier. Like I know there's people who prefer the 650 because of that, really like flavored kind of, or warmer flavored kind of presentation, but for just sheer clarity, I would say the Sundara and an amplifier. But then if you're considering that 1.5k mid forwardness to be its defining feature, then yeah, you'd want to look at like the focals, like the clear, the OG clear, or the Alex from Drop. But that has a bit more aggressive treble, right? So it doesn't retain the treble smoothness. And I know people who the source memers, they'll have a 650 and then they'll have like $5,000 amps and stuff like that. So for them that is the end game headphone. But that's not how I approach this stuff. Critical Plus, my favorite StarCraft streamer, streaming. Oh geez, I haven't streamed StarCraft in a long time. I did play it yesterday. I've been sort of playing it here and there, just just casually, just doing silly stuff. I got myself back into Diamond League, which is fun. Diamond League doing just stupid stuff. But shouldn't be long before Masters again. If I decide to keep playing, I don't know if I will. Still can't decide on a DAC amp purchase after 6+ months of research. Am I doing the audiophile thing right? Get an Atom, the Atom stack. Does it like? Yeah, I mean, you can go all kinds of crazy with this, but if you don't have one and you're just looking for something basic, get the Atom Stack. I'm gonna recommend that over the shit stuff now. Um, I couldn't tell you about the Jot 2. Um, yeah, I mean, for the mid-level like stuff, I recommend the Rebel amp. It's just hard to find right now, I think. Um, so you suggest the Odyssey headband mod for the HE6. I feel more comfort. Actually, this is the ZMF Pilot Pad, which seems to work pretty well. The Velcro seems to be kind of not sticking as much as it used to, but the it's a really comfortable headband, so it makes it very comfortable. So I recommend that, or either this one or the other one. I can't remember which is which. How does the Odyssey LCD XC scale with amplifiers? How does anything scale with amplifiers? Um, no, I mean I use it off of like it's not it doesn't require a ton of power, that one, so you can run it off a lot of stuff. Oh, the Edifier stacks thing. That is my understanding is that is the Odyssey LCD1 closeback that they were working on, and so maybe they worked out some sort of partnership there. It's pretty cool. Trying to get caught up here. There was something I saw. Resolve, what do you think about Corinne's take on amps? Yeah, I generally agree. I think so. Okay, here's somewhat of a spicy take on that. I do think there are differences, and I think even Chronicle would probably acknowledge that there are differences. But where we agree is, or at least I imagine we agree, is that they're not proportional to just the same amount of money put to different headphones if you're looking for that kind of improvement, right? So, for example, if the frequency response is totally, if there's nothing changing the frequency response, and you're considering buying an amplifier to improve something that is frequency response related, that you don't like about your headphones, or you're not thrilled with about your headphones, getting another amplifier is not going to fix that for you, and you might as well put that money into different headphones. Now, with that said, if you have found the headphone that you think is the perfect headphone, like the perfect headphone for you, then sure, go nuts. But I still think that dare I say, the perfect headphone doesn't exist. And you would probably still be better suited. You would still get more enjoyment out of something else, or just exploring something else, seeing what else is out there. I know that not everybody shares that opinion, but I think it is a more prudent thing to do to spend the vast majority on headphones and only a fraction of that on the amplifiers. And when you're considering getting another amplifier, consider if that's the right thing, or if you're just playing the sunk cost fallacy game. It's different when you're dealing with like Susvara and like Endgame and ridiculous, high-end stuff. That question is a different one. But for 90% of people, right, or the majority of people who are, especially if you're just trying to get into this stuff, that's something you need to worry about the least. You just have an Atom Stack, or something that is good enough, and then you focus most of your attention towards the headphones. Make sure that is the right thing, right? The research on the amplifiers, as long as it's not broken, as long as it's got enough power, you'll be fine there. Then if you decide that this audiophile thing is for you, and you want to explore more, then yeah, absolutely go down that rabbit hole. See what other differences there are. See if you try different output impedance synergies, for example, right? It's all kinds of fun stuff that you can do. But for most people, I don't think that's a thing to stress about, you know. And definitely don't chase the synad thing, because that's nonsense. DMG, what's up? Is the Warwick Bravura better than the Susvara? Good question. I didn't compare them side by side. I heard them. I went back to the Warwick acoustics room 3 times. It's funny. Everybody keeps asking about the Bravura. The one that I liked the best in that room was the Aperio. The problem is the Aperio is very expensive. But other people, the people I was with, liked the Bravura tonality better, and I understand that. I found the Aperio to be the more resolving one. But I didn't get a chance to compare with the Susvara, so I can't really say whether or not it's better. The one consideration there is that the Bravura headphone is only around, I think, $2,000, whereas it's with the system. You have to buy it with that the Energizer and system there, and that's what makes it, you know, close to the Susvara price in total. I think there's folks, if they already have that from the Sonoma Model 1, they can just buy the Bravura and not spend that total amount. Although I don't know how different the Bravura is from the Sonoma Model 1, so I know it was a little bit different because they had a different headband and, you know, that going on, but I don't know. I'd have to check out them side by side to get a sense of that. Let's see. Having worked in headphone acoustics for more than 15 years, I'm always surprised how reviewers describe the tuning process. Describe how you think the tuning process during development works. How I think the tuning process during development works? Yeah, so I'm not sure if you saw, but we're actually developing our own custom planar transducer. Well, we hopefully turns into a headphone. That's the goal. I'll be doing some more videos about that. I'll try to do one next week if I can. But right now, with an open back planar, a lot of the tuning was what I've found, at least. A lot of the tuning, I mean, yeah, it starts from the driver. The driver needs to cover as much range as possible. We want to have as low resonance frequency as possible. But because we're going with a coupled design, so that means that this part is actually coupled to the side of the head. You know, we don't have to worry as much about that as I think we did originally. So, you know, we still get perfectly, you know, linear bass extension all the way down. But then the other aspect is the pads. Well, it's also the driver implementation into the chassis and how all of that works. But then, yeah, a lot of it is in the pads. So right now, actually, I should show the frequency response that we've ended up with the design that we've gone with so far. And it has ear gain. And so right now it's a matter of making sure we're, you know, figuring out how we customize pads to, wow, the cops are after me again. This is like a problem living next to a street. Is to figure out how to customize the pads to achieve kind of the results that we want. So changing the, you know, pad volume and stuff like that is kind of where we're at. With a closed back dynamic driver, for example, I imagine the tuning process would be different. Still something to do with the pads. And I've actually been taking apart some closed backs and doing some damping with various different materials, just to sort of see what I can change and how to. But that's mostly in the bass. But yeah, my answer there is probably depends on what type of headphone is being developed. DMG, thank you. Someone recommended me the Warwick Bravura over the Susvara. Would you say one sounds better than the other in some significant way? I was saying, like, I can't answer that because I only heard them at a high-end show, and I didn't compare the two, right? I only heard the Bravura like next to the Aperio. The Aperio was clearly more detailed, but the Bravura was more versatile, right? It was the one that was a little bit more relaxed in the treble, not as much ear gain. Hey Resolve, what what don't you like about a V-shaped sound signature? What makes you dislike the i600's V-shape but enjoy the Monarch Mark II with elevated bass and treble? Well, because the Monarch Mark II isn't really V-shaped. The Monarch Mark II is more just like neutral with a bass boost. I mean, if you think the Monarch Mark II is V-shaped, the i600 is very V-shaped in relation to that, right? I showed in the measurement, like the i600 is like much more treble, like significantly more treble in the mid treble and above, and significantly more bass. The Monarch Mark II is... The reason I say Monarch Mark II is like a little bit on the analytic side is because it is a little more forward there for ear gain. But and then, you know, the bass shelf is a little lower down, right? Which I think is demonstrative of neutral with a bass boost. But to answer the other part of that question, what don't you like about a V-shaped sound signature? That Monarch has a low treble peak. Yeah. Totally. But like the overall balance is not like that is the thing to nitpick about the Monarch Mark II. I would agree as well. Is that the treble, there is some stuff there you can tip roll probably, but the Monarch Mark II, you know, I wouldn't call that V-shaped. I would call that analytic, neutral with a bass boost. But what don't I like about V-shaped sound signatures? It's one of those things where it's kind of like fun and attention grabbing at first, but then you realize that I didn't come up with this, so no credit to me on this. But someone mentioned that sound signature is like a sandwich, and you have your bass and treble is like the bread, and then you know the mids like they're all the ingredients in the middle. And you know the bread matters, right? Like it's important, and you can have really good quality bread, and that really counts. That you know counts for a lot. But it's the ingredients that really, you know, if you didn't have any ingredients, that would be a shit sandwich. Well, not a shit sandwich, but you know what I mean. It would suck compared to something that's got really good ingredients. So that's why I don't like V-shaped sound signatures. I prefer to have, you know, ingredients. You want smooth between 4 and 8K. Smooth between 4 and 8K. I mean, to a certain extent, the Meze Empyrean is, but it's pretty spicy above that. Maybe wait for that 109 to come out and see how that is. Because I have no idea, but it's one on my radar. You tried the LCD-X 2021 today. It was quite more bassy and detailed than your LCD-X 2020. Is my unit faulty? Well, they're very different. Also, one of them is LCD-X, not LCD-XC. Okay. The big difference is they made a driver revision and changed the pads. The 2020 version uses memory foam pads. Still technical, but they needed EQ. Like, no question. Like, categorically needed EQ, the 2020 versions. 2021's is totally EQ optional because they actually have ear gain, right? So that probably accounts for a lot of it. How's the AB coming along? Yeah, it's still in the works. It exists. It's just it looks like a PCB, and I want it to be in a box. I mean, I want to show people the schematic, but it looks super janky right now. That's the problem. And so I'm working with someone to sort of help build that. Any updates to your office setup recommendations? Yeah, I should do that. I really should do an updated office headphone recommendation for 2022. Right now, I'm rocking this, which is the Celestigia. This is you guys can see. So it's the Celesti, but I put the Elegia headband on it. Don't do this, by the way. Like, just you heard it from me. Do not try this at home. because you have to take apart the headphones on the cup and then unscrew the in order to get access to being able to unscrew the spring mechanism in the cup, and then you can remove the headband. So I really recommend not doing that. But the reason why I did it was because I found that the Celeste's clamp was too strong, and so I just put it on the Elegia, and it's much more comfortable now for me. I mean, it's big head problems, right? But for that reason, I'm actually going to recommend the Radiance over the Celeste. I think the other thing about the Celeste is that it is a little bit analytic. It is a little bit like mid-range, upper mid-range, strong, mid-range analytic. Whereas the Radiance is a little more of a, well, yeah, it's a little bit more chilled out overall. Better space and stage. But so what I do, rocking this one with my EQ on it is really nice right now. But I would suggest, yeah, Radiance is probably the way to go for best office headphones, that type of thing. I mean, to a certain extent, I would almost recommend IEMs as well, because they're more inconspicuous. You know, the U6T still gets a very strong recommendation for me, and there are times when, like, I would actually even say, yeah, the U6T, I think it has a more pleasant tuning overall than the Celeste G. It's a little bit more like fun. I don't know how else to describe it. It's I wouldn't say that it's like, you compare the U12T, the U6T to the U12T, and the U12T is clearly more refined, but there's something super fun about the U6T with its colorations that I enjoy. Resolve, aren't you supposed to get laser eye surgery? Yeah, exactly. I can't see anything but huge soundstage. Yeah. So these glasses actually have very thin arms, and the whole purpose of getting them, in spite of the fact that it makes me look like a total dork, is, and so I can see things, is so that they don't actually create significant leaks, like my other like the thicker armed glasses do. So yeah, these are the audiophile glasses, but I do want to at some point get laser eye surgery for audiophile reasons. Do you still listen to and enjoy your Night Owl? It's in pieces over there. The reason being is I was trying to mod it to try and get it to, give it some ear gain, basically. The comfort is amazing on that one still. Probably the most comfortable headphone. The build is great, but no, I haven't listened to that in a long time. And no, I would not recommend it today. It's too weird. I'm sure I've missed questions, so if I've missed your question, just feel free to ask it again. And best entry level IM depends how you qualify entry level, but I do recommend stuff like the Dunu Titan S, the Moondrop Kato, there's a new one from the Audio, the Elixir, which is really solid. It's just a little bit mid forward, but it's, for those who find like the Kato a little bit shouty, I think that the Elixir is maybe a little bit more on the money. Also the 7Hz Timeless, that wrapped go hook thing for those wanting the open back one. What else have I covered that's good? Oh, the C Audio Yume Midnight was really good. I don't know but again, I don't know if you consider that entry level, right? That's like entry to mid. Oh, the Moondrop Aria, of course, is another good one. Moondrop Chew, I haven't heard that one, but I'm sure that it has decent, it's got a good tuning. SA6, so good, so good. Yeah, like, I would take the SA6 at $500 over most closed back headphones. Like, full stop. The thing is, there's a lot of people who just can't use IEMs in general. They're not comfortable with them. I mean, those ones they're reasonably comfortable, but like, some people are just like, I'm a no IEM guy, right? Or no IEM person. Uh, Other closed backs at around $500. The Drop Aeon X closed is very good. That frequency response is one of the best ever. It's outstanding. It's like a Sundara in closed back form. I mean, it's not as detailed, right? But still, it's very, very good. Um, yeah, you're asking about the Allegia. People ask about, the Allegia or the Aeon X closed. I'm telling you, Aeon X closed every time. The frequency response is so good on that headphone. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it doesn't have the dynamics and the detail and the technicalities, right? But it doesn't matter because the frequency response is so good on that one. Yes, some people are like, oh yeah, like I don't really care about a wonky tuning because the technical performance is so good. I think you can go the other way on that too. Like to a certain extent, the Blessing 2 is kind of like that, right? Where it's like, I mean, there's nothing really that special about those technicalities, but the tuning is so damn good. I mean, it's fine for its technicality. It's not behind the competition. It's just nothing special, right? And there's probably stuff that's more technical at even lower prices, but like it is the tuning that really makes those amazing. Did you end up getting the big headband for the LCD5? I did not yet. I need to do that. I need to reach out to Odyssey about a number of things, including the MM500. Well, I think we actually already have reached out to them on that, but I need to also reach out about the headband LCD5 and potentially just getting another unit in just to make sure. What is my background? How did you get into this? What was your major? Are you professional or amateur musician or sound engineer? Okay, so my background. um, my major was it's weird because it actually does relate. So what I studied in university, both in undergrad, more so in grad school than in undergrad. I did my master's thesis on perception, and so I did both degrees in analytic philosophy, but my master's thesis specifically was on perception. And at the time, I wasn't thinking about it in this context, but it was about affective consciousness, so basically positive and negative valences towards things. As far as the music stuff, so I grew up in a household where I woke up every morning at around 6 a.m. to my dad playing classical guitar, flamenco guitar. He was a music teacher, right? And also like a concert guitarist. I played a whole bunch of different instruments growing up. I played piano. As a really young kid, I played violin, but I wasn't really into that. But yeah, I played piano. But I mostly played the drums and I had a band. But I mean, that's like a long time ago. And then got into playing guitar because it is so much more convenient to travel places, or move places and live. Like, I don't have a drum set here, but I have a guitar, right? So that's about as far as it goes for me as far as music is concerned. Like being a musician, I would describe myself as comfortably as a failed musician. I don't know if I ever took it all that seriously, but I did make money at a time in my life playing music, so I guess that counts. But yeah. Not a sound engineer. I have recorded an album, but I'm not a sound engineer by any stretch. Thoughts on the Meze Advar? I think it's a V-shaped sounding IEM. It's a bit I don't mind where the bass is at. I think the treble is a bit much for me. I mean, okay, I should say it is like guilty pleasure kind of thing, right? It's bass and treble. So yeah, obviously it's too much, but like it's not in a way where it sort of drowns things out to me. Maybe because the treble is elevated. I don't know. I'd have to measure it and spend more time with it. But from my time listening to it, it sounded Like not my kind of tuning, but definitely had good technicalities. A lot better than the Rye Penta and sort of what I'd expected from from the previous IEMs that they did. So I do think that it is. This might just be like a new trend for Meze, but like their stuff that I've heard recently has been so much better for some of these qualities that I index for, technicalities and all that kind of stuff. So uh, if you're into a V-shaped kind of sound, I would recommend the Advar. Yeah, it reminded me of like that Valkyrie from Empire. How do people not find the Aria SE hot in the treble? It is hot in the treble. The 2020 Sindara has a slight 6K peak. That's very audible to me, but not overly annoying, whilst the Aria has much more treble energy overall. Yeah, it just has more ear gain. That's why, like, for me, I say it's appropriate, like, for the genres that I like. Like, it's really good for jazz and acoustic and classical. There are absolutely genres where, like, I would not choose the Aria. It's just too much ear gain. So I recommend just dropping it by like 2 dB with a shelf filter, above 3K. 2 to 2.5 maybe. The overall balance is fine. You don't have any weird harmonics being elevated over the ones above them. Nothing. There's like maybe like you could see maybe slightly in the graph, but like it's not significant. Let me get back on track here, guys. Happy Saturday. What's up, Eskimo Bob? Good to see you. I just saw you. 64 Audio is the most comfortable headphone I've ever used. I can use it for hours on end. Yeah, they're solid. I wouldn't say that they're the most comfortable IEM I've ever tried, but they're good enough. I have no problems. Oh, you mean they're the most comfortable headphone because they compete with over-ear headphones? Because yeah, they are like that is easily, like anytime 64 Audio comes out with a new product, I'm like, okay, I gotta try that. Because not every one of them has been for me, but you can always tell that they're very good at something, right? What pair of headphones you got on currently? Resolve. This is the original HE6 6-screw. So I guess it's not the original, but you know what I mean. It's the original. Your thoughts on the Clear versus Utopia? You love the Utopia, but it's too expensive. Okay, yeah. So I don't know. I like the Clear better, like the original Clear better than the Magnesium. So yeah, for me, I think maybe it depends on listener age a little bit, but for me the issue with the Magnesium is that while it did smooth out some of the mid treble, the upper treble was a bit too forward for me, and if you're of the age where that doesn't bother you, then that's gonna be fine. But for me, that like upper treble was just too zingy. I think Golden found something similar, so maybe it's one for people who are 40 plus. But yeah, and also like Bad Sea Tech just recently reviewed both, and he preferred the MG as well. So just goes to show that there's people like me and Corinne who prefer the OG, and then there's people like Bad Sea Tech who prefer the MG. Do you believe in free will? No. Are we predestined to spend all of our money on audio gear and go bankrupt? Yes. We are. We are. Other people, who've made better life choices probably aren't. No, other people with different biology and environmental impacts probably make better choices. But I mean, it's like that's probably what led me to be an audiophile, is the fact that I grew up surrounded by musicians like all the time, right? So like real like music in person. It was like a big thing for me, and hearing headphones that didn't do a very good job of reproducing that, and then seeing those headphones lauded basically like or like the list best of, or watching a review from someone who doesn't know what the hell they're talking about. It's like, oh man. It's probably what not the best reason, it's not a very nice reason, but it's probably the thing that sparked or got the motivation going. Like I'm talking about, like when people would talk about like like the M50X, or like Beats and whatever, right? And I kept thinking to myself, like, there's got to be something better. There has to be, and there was. Turns out. What, in your opinion, would make the best headphones to escape mid-fi hell? um, To a certain extent, the Hi-Fi Man Aria. To a certain extent, or LCD-X 2021. I would say if you're at an LCD-X 2021, you are comfortably out of mid-fi. And yeah, you can get into EQing and stuff like that. I'd also recommend that. But also, do you need to get out of mid-fi hell? Right? Like, if you, like, yeah, I mean, sure, the LCD-X 2021 is more impressive than the Sundara. But for the tuning, the Sundara is basically endgame. Like I mean, yeah, there's things that I would do differently on the Sundara. I would want more bass extension with a stronger bass shelf into the sub bass, right? For example. But apart from that, it's pretty darn close. Trying to get into jazz lately, but having a hard time finding anything decent. What jazz album? Depends. If you're looking for vocal jazz, that's different from if you're looking for like instrumental jazz. But for instrumental jazz, I really like Ting Val Trio. Check out their album called Beat. BEAT, not the vegetable or tuber or whatever that is. We're not making borscht. Although I love borscht. Seems okay to say I index for once or twice, but do you think you've come to use it too often? Probably, yeah. I mean, a lot of it is because I'm trying to come up with some sort of like actual index for what might be predictive for people beyond. I mean, this is a bigger project, right? It's not something that's like, I don't have a line of sight to that yet, but I would love to be able to come up with something where I could say, based on your preferences, what you specified and sort of the weighting, right? What's important to you, it would lead you to like this thing, right? So you'd have a clear understanding of because right now it's my recommendations list is based on just the things that I'm personally indexing for, and that's not necessarily what everybody else is. So the reason why I use that term a lot is because I would like to create literally an index that has different weighting depending on user inputs. Let's see. I don't really have like a favorite artist or band. I mean, maybe, but then it would probably be more like the metal side of things, or like the nostalgia stuff from my youth. Bands where I'm like, yeah, I will always listen to that. I don't like this is the thing, right? Like, when I say jazz, I don't mean like the old timey, like poorly recorded jazz. I mean like modern jazz. And honestly, the only reason why I'm not into the older stuff, because like I really like Charles Mingus, for example, but I don't really like to listen to that because the recordings are so bad. So yeah, I don't really use that in my tests when I'm doing my evaluations. You're interested in the Odyssey MM500. Have you had your hands on them yet? No, but yeah, the request is put in. We'll see. I'm trying to get one. Yeah, I'm also very interested in that one. That one is like that's as soon as we get that one, I'm basically going to drop everything and cover it. Right. Aeon X closed versus Celeste. Good question. Good question. I think it's like closer would be Aeon Noir versus Celeste, right? Celeste is more dynamic. I'm still going to say the Aeon X closed has a better frequency response. The tonal balance is better on the Aeon X closed without EQ, right? So for people who aren't going to EQ, there's an argument there that Aeon X closed and see, it's funny because the Aeon X closed is even better for tonal balance than the Noir. Now the Noir is definitely not as sort of dull and blunted. That's the downside with the Noir or with the Aeon X closed, is that the trailing ends of tones are kind of lopped off a little bit. Some people don't mind that, but to me that is like an absence of detail, right? And those other ones like the Noir doesn't have that problem. The Celeste doesn't have that issue. But for the tonal balance, like for the overall relative balance of bass, mids, and treble, that Aeon X closed is one of the best. TechMed Rainer Richter, thank you. Thank you for that. I will endeavor to keep it up. If you have a question, feel free to drop it, and I will do what I can. Matt, you're very welcome. Real audio reviews. Is the Dan Clark Stealth the best tuned headphone objectively? No. So I mean, the best tuned headphone objectively. All right. So what's funny is that one, depending on the positioning, like for how it is on people's head, you can actually get a different result than what you get on the rig. And I found that on my head, I got that result, meaning that I had to kind of move it like into a weird position, like that, to make it match the tonal balance that was on the rig. So for me, it was actually shouty. But if you're talking strictly about target adherence, it's one of the best. It's up there for sure. Other headphones that are up there for target adherence, honestly, the Aeon X close. But here's where I say you shouldn't just index for target adherence, because, and this is why I'm going to say you can't actually answer that question of what the best tuned headphone objectively is, because the targets that we're using, the main target that we use is smooth to 1/3 or 1/2 octave, which means we don't know what the individual features for the frequency response above 5K should be for any individual. I did this in the reading measurements video. I've talked about this. And there's an example there of smooth versus unsmoothed. And what people need to realize is that when they're looking at a measurement relative to the Harman target, it's a very fine-grained measurement relative to a very highly smooth target. So we actually don't know what is objectively correct there. Above 5K. Now, again, if I've talked about this before, and it gets into some very difficult to understand topics, but essentially, Sean's contention is that as you change the position, those features start to sort of smooth out and start to look a little bit more like the target. So he thinks it's okay that the target is smooth to 1/3 or 1/2 there. That's where I kind of disagree, because I think we're better off getting a mode or median of an average ear than having that highly smooth thing. I mean, to a certain extent, if you're talking about like a wide variety of headphones for a general audience, yeah, you need to have a smooth target like that, right? But I still think that we might as well include those features above 5K, because just because the direction, just because it changes based on the position, that doesn't mean that it goes away. And different people it's going to change differently for different people as well. So basically what I'm saying is I would rather take a stab at getting it 100% correct, even though there's bound to be significant variance there. And you're going to have to do a much more heuristic, trial and error approach for the chance of getting it perfect, to see if that actually yields something that is subjectively preferred. Whereas if you're considering, okay, what should the general tonal balance be for things to not sound wrong for most people, then I think, yeah, you have to go with the highly smooth target, and so it makes sense why they did what they did, and I agree with them doing that. I just, as someone who gets deep into the nerdy aspects of all of this, I wish they had the fine-grained information as well. Because here's the thing, even if you had the fine-grained information for a Gross Keymar, right, which is technically doable, right? We even showed an example of that in that video where we took a DF HRTF and then applied the Harman tilt, or you guys would see it this way. Would you? No. You get what I mean. We applied the Harman shelf. Even that isn't going to be necessarily what it should be for you, right? So that's just what it is for the Keymar, right? So, those constraints notwithstanding, like, this is why the 5128 is exciting and interesting, and I really want one, because then we have a better idea of what an average human head, like, we could actually get better information from an average, what's closer to an actual human, right? That's not to say that the Gross stuff, the 43 IGs, are, like, they're actually generally quite accurate for most of it, and you can get really useful information from that stuff. It's just that it's less representative of, it's not as representative as a 5128 of an actual human. I would argue there are certain things that you can do better. Like, there's always room for improvement. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent. Ben J, is balance needed on Q-Deluxe 5K for HD650 with EQ? I would say probably. The thing with those, I haven't tested that specifically, so I can't give you a definitive answer. Don't go spending tons of money on cables. Please don't go spending tons of money on cables. But the thing with these, almost all of these, the amount of power that's here is not significant. They are the equivalent of, like, some of the dongle DACs that you see out there. It's just in wireless form, right? These are not, massive. What are you talking about, John? Yeah, these don't have, a ton of power to them, right? So I would probably go balanced, especially if you're getting into EQ and you're, deciding to, use this as your primary source. I would probably go balanced, personally. What's your impression on LTT getting 5128? I think it's awesome. I mean, so the nice thing about him he didn't just get a 5128. He got 5128 and a Super HMS. And he also got the right people in his lab to be operating this and coming to, and basically putting together whatever assessments or judgments there are about that. What I worry about is them basically setting the stage for a very, like, the stuff that they're covering, the types of headphones that they're covering are typically going to be the more consumer focused stuff, and I worry about too much focus on things like target adherence there as well. But knowing the people who are running it, like, they are also very, very good. So I'm hopeful. Basically, I'm optimistic about that. Even though there's many pitfalls that they could have gone down, at the very least they've got the right people in charge. You came from the Sundara to the HE6 SEV2, and you realize Sundara tuning is absolutely impressive to the point you might want to keep the Sundara for the tuning. I could see that. The Sundara tuning I think is better. Yeah, it doesn't have the distance in the mids between 1K and like 3K, right? And part of that is due to the Sundara chassis design, which is something that I discovered by taking the pad off and then filling in the gap with blue tack. Now, it didn't totally change it, but it appears that has an effect both on the bass. Well, it definitely has an effect on the bass because that's where the Sundara bass lift, like into the mid bass, comes from. But also, it has an effect in the mids as well. But Resolve, Linus hates bassy headphones. I have no idea what Linus likes. I should hang out with Linus. I haven't. I used to know him like a long time ago, because we were working in the same industry back then. But I've never known him professionally. So I bet if I met him today, he probably wouldn't remember. I've seen you and DMS say you can get a decent balanced cable for $20, but I can never find those cables. Have I said that? I just use cables from Amazon. Like just the basic, And there's a whole segment of this audience who's like, what? How can you be an audiophile and use Amazon cables? But it's like this type of thing, right? It's a very basic, no-nonsense cable. This one is... I don't know where this is from. It's just a cable. Best headphones for the shower. Make sure you're using electrostatic head. No, just kidding. Don't do that. That could be like another segment, like water, like super waterproof IEMs or something, or headphones you can use in the shower. Any comparison video for Hyphaman Edition XS soon? Comparison to what? I think the main thing to compare it to is the Ananda and the Sundara, which we did. Unless there's something else at $500 that we should be comparing it to. It's probably the best headphone at $500. Best sounding headphone at $500. It's very competitive. Yeah. Do you have any updates on the headphones you were designing? I am buying tools to make one. Note to. Not sure what you mean at the end there, but yeah. So the headphones, yeah, I'll have a video out hopefully sometime next week. We'll be filming it next week. I don't know exactly when it'll come out. On the planar that we're developing. I don't know when. Like, this is still very much in the R&D stage, right? So there's a bunch of things that we're trying to work out with that. We're trying to figure out. Like I have it to a point where like. The frequency response is actually reasonably balanced, but I'm looking for more. I'm looking for some of the things that are the more subjective aspects that aren't easily identifiable in frequency response. And so far, maybe I get one of them, but then I lose another, right? So I don't have everything there yet. And so that's why we're still on driver iteration, driver design and prototyping for that. But as an example right now, the driver that is the most promising, well, there's two drivers that I have right now. One of them is a gold material on PET. The other is a gold material on kind of like a rubber membrane, it's a PU rubber. And what's funny, and the idea there was to try and balance out stiffness and compliance a little bit. But The problem with that one, at least the current iteration of it, is that it's not particularly detailed, right? Like we get the resonance frequency to be very low, which is good, and we could, because we want to be able to have, lots of bass presence all the way down, bass extension, and we were trying to do some stuff with the leak to try and maybe boost the bass, and so that was the idea behind that. We might still, I'm not sure, but when we did that, we achieved some of the things we're looking for, but then kind of it just didn't sound as detailed as the gold on PET. So we're back to that, but then still trying to explore potential other things, because we've done like aluminum on I think we did silver on aluminum for one of them, silver on PET. Like we've tried all kinds of different stuff. I think we did PEEK at one point. And they all had different strengths and weaknesses. Let's put it that way. But now I think we're trying additional parameters to try and see, one of them is still the diaphragm material, investigating that, because there are so many different there's so many different potential things that you could make the diaphragm out of. So we're still sort of going down that route, but we also want to go down some of these other routes, like testing things like flux density and all that stuff. Hopefully that was a sufficient answer to on an update for an update on that. You're the only one who showers with the HE1. That's a bad idea. Don't do that. Have you ever noticed a drop in sound quality using EQ, loss in technical performance? So that's a good question, Ari, because people will, typically, if they're like in the anti-EQ gang, they'll often go to this. I think that if you're going to say yes, it does, then you also need to say how. And if it is a matter of so for example, I've never heard that if I've just done something with like a planar where I've just added a bass shelf or something like that, right? But if someone is making like tons of different adjustments, and then they go, okay, the adjustments got it closer to the target, but it lost detail and resolution, right? If that's the claim that they're making, then they need to think about maybe why that's the case. And if it's just because something sounds magically digital, right? That doesn't fly. I don't think that's a very good argument. Or that it was because of digital that now it's worse for these different qualities. I don't think that's a good argument. But rather you should look at, what were the adjustments that you made, and recognize that the adjustments that you're making to a graph, right? Unless you have a measurement rig in front of you, right? The adjustments you're making to a graph are not necessarily going to be the way that those adjustments are. Like, it's not going to be a perfect representation of how the wearing situation affects the frequency response on your head. So this is why when you're doing your EQs, you have to be as conservative as possible, and you also have to, if you're doing anything above 5K specifically, honestly even lower than that, but let's just say 5K to be safe, do it by ear, right? You can, if there's something that you see on the graph, you're like, yeah, I hear that, that's really bad. Like, sure, yeah, okay. Like, fix the peak, the 8.5K peak on the DT1990, for example. But, make sure you're dialing that stuff in by ear, because your wearing situation could have a peak somewhere that shows a dip, or vice versa. And so you need to make sure that you kind of factor that in. So let me go back to answer the question. Nothing, when things are EQ'd either properly or with the right amount of restraint, let's put it that way, no, there's no loss in technical performance that I've noticed. One thing that can happen though is people will, when they're doing their comparison back and forth, they will forget to change their digital volume. And when they forget to change the digital volume, then the non-EQ'd version ends up being louder. And volume is a great way to conflate technical performance. Because if you're not listening at the same volume, the louder one is going to sound like, oh, there's more detail, there's more, whatever, right? But so yeah, that's why you have to lower your digital volume, zero out your pregain, and then turn it on and off, right? And see if there's any improvement. You're new to headphones. Can the LCD XC be made to sound warm or a bit darker with EQ? Yes, it can. We did a video on that, on how to EQ headphones. Watch the most recent one we did, because it kind of goes through, like, it's not just like, you know, specific filters, but also how to set up the EQ software with Windows, because Windows is you could do it with Mac, but I think you have to pay for that. I don't know about a free version. Adding a bass shelf ruins many headphones. H800S, Aria, Clear MG all sound messy with Harman bass. I don't know about that. 2018 bass or 2013 bass? I think 2013 bass is fine. 2018, yeah, for me is a bit much, I think. HE6 with a bass shelf is, yeah, that's where it's at. I actually think Aria with a bass shelf is fine, but you can't just add a bass shelf on the Aria, because you have to remember that they often don't seal perfectly around the ear, so you're getting the lift from the driver resonance frequency as well. So what you see on a graph there, this is why, again, why I say you have to do this by ear. What you're seeing on a graph there isn't necessarily what you're hearing in the bass in that case, if the coupling is such where the seal is broken slightly, even just a slight leak on those, right? And they often do, because they drop down, you know, quite strongly towards the jaw. Even if there's a slight leak, the bass can rise up. So if it sounds muddy, it's probably because you probably need to then compensate for that. If you're adding that sub bass shelf, right, you need to reduce, you know, 150 hertz or something like that, 150 to 200 hertz. Clear as well, Clear MG, it if you look at the frequency response of all those focals, they have good bass extension, but they don't go down towards the bottom part of the ear gain at around 150 hertz. So if all you're doing is adding a bass shelf, you are kind of like, you're adding a bass shelf without putting the dip that needs to be there in place. Or not, it doesn't need to be there, right? It's just one of those things where if you're looking for clarity and you're worried about the bass bleeding into the mids, if there's a lot of warmth there at around 150 hertz, and you're also adding a bass shelf, that can make things sound a bit too thick, at least in my view. H800S as well is yeah, it's not the best headphone to add a bass shelf to. But even the H800S and the original HD800 at the bottom part of the ear gain is there's more there's more energy there. What frequency should I start a bass shelf at? On most headphones, for me, it's under 100 hertz. But it depends on the headphones, right? Because there's some headphones that do have that dip. To be clear, I don't think that dip is necessary. I think the dip is probably too much. I think we should probably be aiming for mostly linear, just with like a slightly downwards taper, kind of like what you get on this one, but it's all the way well extended. But like it has just a slight downwards taper, right? Same thing with the LCD5, for example. But then you add the bass shelf, and so you have maybe a little bit more presence there at around 150 hertz than what the target asks for. But there are a lot of headphones where, because they're open back, that's really where there's a lot more presence. And if you add a bass shelf to like a Meze Empyrean, for example, right, without compensating for the mid bass and upper bass, that's going to be a bit rough. Plus 30 dB HE6, no, don't do that. 2018 bass sounds bad. I also think 2018 is probably too much. Yeah, you lose the tightness, right? You lose the sense of clarity for the bass if you go too much on that. But you know, I like mostly linear bass with just like I would almost even prefer the lift to be even further into the sub bass, and just have it be flat, you know, flat down to like, you know, 100 or 90 hertz even, and then have the lift go up. That'd be kind of what I like. Because the reason why you want it to be still present there at the lowest part of the ear gain is there's a lot of music that just doesn't have any information into the sub bass, and you still want that to sound full and you know, have body and all that stuff. Sean Olive doesn't like upper bass. I also don't like upper bass. But what I'm saying is like just don't make the bottom part of the ear gain like so significant. There are some headphones where they go even further than that. There. Pardon me. Aria can fit weird, pull them slightly off your ears, and the bass is hella boosted. That's what I'm talking about. That's the resonance frequency going up. And that's happening even just to a small degree when there's even just like a small little imperfection with the seal, right? So when they're worn on the head, not a measurement fixture, right? When they're worn in practice, there's always a chance that the contours to the side of your head can have an effect on this. So you might actually be boosting, if you're applying a 2018 Harman shelf, it might actually be boosting the bass significantly more. Is it true that before reviewing headphones you were taming sea lions? That's a weird thing to say. So no. What? Before I was reviewing headphones, I was like, before I was doing it professionally, I was working at the university, and I was, I was working in the logic department, which was a ton of fun. But my contract didn't get renewed. It's not like they pay you all that well, anyways. So, and then I was doing some work doing like documentary film stuff, which was great. I got to go to some really cool places, but it also had the most insane like work hours that like was really bad for my health. It was hard to keep up. So yeah, that's what I was doing before. You're talking about differences to the Focal Utopia. I can actually speak to that a little bit. I think that's to do with the pads. In fact, I'm very confident that that's all that is. I think even Kryn measured on one of his units. He measured I think it was the MG. There was a difference in the pads, and I found the same thing. So I think that's probably what accounts for that. But they should be back on whatever pads they were doing before, I believe. If your head were a Kemar rig, you would be the best subjectivist reviewer. Why? You don't want your head to be a Kemar rig. You want your head to be a B&K 5128. No, but this is the thing. With those measurement rigs, right? Like people are now because Linus has the 5128. People are now going to be like, oh yeah, all the Gross stuff is like unimportant because this new standard exists. It's like the new standard is clearly better, right? It is a very advanced system. It's more advanced, but all of the Kemar stuff, like all the Gross, anthropometric pinna, the KV5000 stuff, that's all great as well, right? And in many ways, that stuff is more useful because that's what the research was done with. So yeah, I mean, now we can do more research. We can get potentially better results. The big advantage with the 5128 is that it is rated for accuracy higher up. But if you know, like, so for example, above 10K, but if you know what the various different coupler or rig features are of the Gross 43AG, for example, or 45CA, then it doesn't matter, right? Like that it's not random, right? Like there's those features features, right? Like even the Concha dip, for example, right? That's a feature at 9K that you need to know about. Those features, they don't really change on that. So as long as you know, I think there's one at 9K and there's one at 13, something around 13. As long as you know what they are, you can get, really reliable information from those as well. So, what is frozen logic? I don't know what that is. You heard in a video? You think who was talking about this? Now I want to know. Was taming sea lions? What the hell? You have to tell me now. Like, what video were you watching where someone said that before I was reviewing headphones, I was taming sea lions? Because that's awesome. No, I was like very much just rooted in like the academic world. I was, planning on being a professor and doing all that stuff, but that didn't pan out. Could Linus make his own target based on calibrated speakers in a room? It wouldn't be preference based. I don't know what. No, I wouldn't. So they might make their own target, but I imagine the approach would be somewhat different. So what I would do is, and I've mentioned this before, and I think Kryn agrees, is I would just take the HRTF, the DF HRTF data from the 5128 and apply the Harman shelf filters, because like that, the Harman research is rock solid, right? Like that the preference adjustments, the shelf filters, right? That's solid. So you could theoretically just take that data and apply it to the to the free field and DF summed HRTFs of the 5128, and then hit that tilt, apply that preference research, and you'll be good to go. It'll look different because you would then not have the less smooth data, I suppose. But to make it an apples to apples comparison, you could smooth it to 1/3, and you could get a 5128 version of that. Jason, thank you. Endgame headphones for EDM. If one of the main things I index for is bass slam, but would also like something usable for other genres. As an example, I really like the Legend X. Utopia, maybe? I don't know if you need to go Utopia for that, though. I mean, yeah, it is punchy, but I would almost say go with a clear. Right? But I don't know, like, okay. That is a tough, like the high end slam stuff. I mean, to a certain extent, that's what the Abyss stuff is all about, even though the tuning's a bit weird. Like Legend X is like extreme bass, right? That is like monster bass to a point where like I wouldn't even guilty pleasure that. I mean, it's very technical. I'll give it that. It is a very impressive IEM, but it is so much bass on that. I can't think of anything that's like the over-ear headphone equivalent. That's like really slammy. You would want to get into EQ. Like in that situation, I would recommend a high-end planar with EQ. To be clear, most planars are not great at slam, but are that quality, right? But some of them are. Like HD6 is, LCD4 is pretty good for that. The Abyss stuff is good for that. That's basically it. Yeah, obviously the Focal stuff, it hits hard, but the tuning is is less. It's not bassy, right? And I think that is an important distinction. Trying to think what else. Like if it's me and I'm looking for that, I find a 6-screw HE6, throw on some Sundara pads, and apply an EQ. Oh wait, that's what I did. um, or what else? I mean, yeah, the same could be said for like one of the high end Odysseys, I suppose, but they're also quite heavy. So I'm excited for this new MM500 or whatever it's called. You know, but it's supposed to be a little bit lighter. That's very exciting to me. But yeah, I can't. I'm trying to think. I can't think of anything that's like Legend X in or similar in an over-ear headphone. If you want something that is slammy and more versatile, yeah, Utopia, or not more versatile, but like, you know, is more like it's for other genres as well. Utopia may be the way to go there for the high end stuff. Um, I think so. The combination that was like the most crazy slammy that I heard was the Utopia off the Forge. But that is also, yeah, starting to get pretty expensive. Be very careful about which Forge you like which of those output impedances you get though. I think if I remember correctly, it was actually the 32 ohm out, because that'll down tilt the whole thing, right? It gives you a bass lift. The thing to caution you about though with Utopia and any of the Focal headphones, if you're considering getting into EQ to give you that crazy bass lift, that is going to change how loud you can play those headphones before they hit their maximum driver excursion limit, which is when people talk about the clipping threshold and all that stuff. Right. Under normal conditions, it's fine. But as soon as you start messing with output impedances, suddenly the 110 dB excursion limit is now 95, right? And then you're actually, or 90 or something like that. So then you're actually, you know, you're going to be hitting it at a much lower volume that's proportional with the bass boost that you give it. So that's why I want to caution you on that. And I would almost suggest something like an LCD-X, even though it's not super punchy. You can do way more as far as EQ goes there. Or an LCD4 or LCD5. Yeah. LCD5 with a monstrous bass shelf. Why can't you not just apply both rigs HRTF to convert measurements between rigs? Why can't you not apply both rigs HRTF? Not totally sure what you mean there. Maybe phrase that a different way, Eskimo Bob. Apply both rigs head related transfer function. So for example, like normalize to an HRTF from a different rig. You can't do that because of the conditions of the coupler that you're currently using. So you can only use the HRTFs from the couplers that you're actually measuring on, right? I don't have faith that Linus, or this is you saying this. You don't have faith that Linus will have the sheer amount of volume database like Super and Chronicle have. I mean, if he wants access to headphones, he can always hit me up and we can make that happen. if he wants to have a database, you know, we can always supply the headphones. It's okay. We sponsor Crin as well, so. Like, I really think that Linus and Co are going after the more consumer focused headphones. Like, I really think that's what they're targeting. Yeah, they'll have some Sennheisers on there, and maybe they'll have some Focals on there, but like really, I think their evaluative measurement stuff is going to be more focused towards, you know, Razer and SteelSeries and all that stuff. It'd be sweet if they got into just headphones in general, though. That'd be cool. And if they want to, you know, that's a conversation that I think we'd be open to. We'll definitely be open to. And also, we know the people who are working with them there, and I know those people are awesome. So, When will we see objective measurements for technical performance? I don't know. This is like a thing that I I wish I could do. I wish we could have something that was predictive of some of these qualities, right? That's really what it's about, is finding a way to make it predictive, so that you can look on a graph and go, okay, this is going to be dull and blunted, as opposed to clear and resolving sounding, right? Or detailed or whatever, right? But you can't yet. And it might not even be that we're not measuring everything or capturing everything. Like, it might just be that we're not, like, there's something in the analysis of frequency response or its relationship to THD or whatever, right? That we're just not, the analysis is incomplete. The dude said that a great white shark ate the sea lions, ending the entire thing. What? Why was I... what did that have to do with me? Oh, Rad Zero. Yeah, Rad Zero is, I suppose, good for electronic. Yeah, the problem with open back planars, though, is that you can't do a bass shelf unless you do some sort of trickery or add EQ, right? So by default, the natural state of open back planars is not going to have a bass shelf, if they're coupled to the side of the head, right? If you do some sort of controlled leak situation, then you can have a lift. And so that's what Abyss does, is they make them so that the headphones aren't very comfortable, but they hang right here, and there's always a gap at the bottom, right? And that basically means that the system that gets created with the eardrum when the headphone is coupled to the side of the head gets broken, allowing the driver to move to basically the resonance frequency of the driver gets incurred as a result of breaking the seal, and then that's what creates the bass lift. That doesn't happen in like most designs in planar magnetic headphones. So you don't get a bass lift on open back headphones. Oh, here's an answer for you. Focal Stellia. You want something that's bassy and slammy and like still detailed and technical? Focal Stellia. Moonborn Unicorn, HD560S for 180, best budget studio headphone. That's definitely up there. The HE400 SE with EQ as well would also be really good. Doesn't need much. Doesn't really need anything, but can. So I'd say it's between those two for me. Also, if you want close back, the K371 is solid. $50,000 rig to test $50 headphones. Honestly, though, why not? That's fine. You're so confused as to why Amir likes the 660S and not the R70X when the R70X adheres to the target more with less bass and treble roll-off. Any thoughts on 660S? So, first of all, I don't think you should be confused about why Amir likes or dislikes anything. It's a great... I don't know. You check out some of the... There's very little consistency to that stuff. But do I have thoughts on the 660S? It is definitely more detailed than the R70X. The R70X is better, is more spacious. It's wider sounding, by a long shot, and I think that's partially because of the way that it could be due to the it takes more of the ear into consideration, the way the coupling is. The 660S is fine. I think it's overpriced given the 600 and 6XX. R70X also has a really good tuning. But I think the Sandara is clearly better than both. Gil, thanks. If amplifiers aren't really important, I believe this is your position. What do you say to others who claim peak power available dramatically changes the response of a set of cans? So nothing that I've measured on this gets into some of the we'll get into. Okay, so I can take a pair of headphones, even like I could take a Sindara, right? Let's just say Sindara requires an amplifier. Let's just make that statement. I can take a Sindara and measure it, just put it on a rig, right, and measure it at 90 dB, let's say. Then, and I can be running it off of a shit Magni 3 Heresy. Then I can plug it into a Rebel amp, also normalize it at 90 dB, run that same measurement, and it will look identical, right? Because, or pick whatever other low output impedance source you want to talk about that has a linear frequency response. So the point there is that for those amplifiers, for the majority of those amplifiers where there is no change to the frequency response, where they have enough power to drive your headphones, that doesn't change. Like the Sindara will not have less bass on the Magni 3 Heresy. It's the same frequency. The Susvara didn't have less bass, right? It's the same. Now that might be different if you have a source that has some change in, if it's a transformer coupled design where there's some unique thing going on with the transformers that is actively changing things, like boosting the bass or something like that, or there's a difference in output impedance where it's dramatic enough to have an effect on the frequency response, then yeah. The other key thing there, and this is something that isn't explored that much, or it's not really explored at all, is there are amplifier designs where manufacturers are they're intentionally conserving second and third harmonic behavior or products to incur what is essentially a psychoacoustic thing, where you can actually we demonstrated this in the article we did on Synod, but so this is an unrelated point. Distortion, second and third harmonic distortion, when it's audible, can actually just be perceived as a slight shift in tone. And so there's some like amplifier designers who are like, hey, let's use that to add some sort of flavor or coloration to the way that this amplifier sounds. They'll use it won't score well on certain rankings or whatever, right? But like they don't care. They're just trying to they're like, oh, I really want it to pair well with this pair of headphones, and so I'm going to make it have this flavor, right? And they'll do that by conserving second and third harmonic or something along those lines, right? They'll create some sort of relationship there. If you want to try this out for yourself, you want to see how that change is in practice. Listen to those two test tones where we had a 315 hertz tone being played with the same third harmonic distortion product at two different volumes. And the point there was more to show that the higher the volume, the more difficult it is to hear the distortion product. The lower the volume, the easier it is to hear. But the fact that the fact that it didn't sound like distortion and it just sounded like a shifted tone means that that can have an effect that can show up in all kinds of other places as well. So to get back to the question, nothing that I've examined, this is how I'm going to answer that question, nothing that I've examined in my testing of amplifiers when it comes to downstream effects of frequency response in headphones has shown that there's anything all that meaningful when going from one of these like entry-level amplifiers to a mid-level amplifier. Things change a bit more when things get a bit esoteric with the designs, and I think I'll grant that, right? And then sure, go for it, go nuts there, because I do think that ultimately, they do make a difference. I do think that there is a difference in amplifiers, right? Like we listened to the Zal HM1 and that sounded crazy, but it wasn't anything that I would be able to identify uniquely in terms of its frequency response, which is what you're getting at here. So I don't know. I still don't know what it is. When people talk about is it just loudness or is there something else? I don't know what the something else is. Honestly, like subjectively, yeah, maybe I can talk about like having heard it, but there's nothing I can point to and say this changed. Here, look, the measurements, this changed. So I don't think that you can do that. I think, and this is why when I was talking to other amplifier designers, and they were telling me that they think that there's stuff that we're not measuring, which is interesting. I don't know if I'd go down that route, but the fact that they're saying it is interesting. Does that answer the question? I hope it does. Did you get a chance to hear the atrium? If so, which one out of the Verite, open, closed, and atrium? I heard it at Munich, high end, and I thought it sounded fine. But I didn't. It's like show conditions, right? Like it's not. It's hard to get a sense, I'm gonna say the safer choice I think is probably the atrium, because the tuning is going to be a little bit more balanced than the Verite. The Verite, you'd want to figure out what pads are best for that, whereas the atrium, I think, is probably a little bit more versatile. I think that Zach even said that on his site, let me know, like, the Verite is like his flavor that he likes, and the atrium is the more linear, more neutral one. Plus, I've owned the Auteur before, and I can say with confidence the Auteur has a better frequency response than the Verite, for what I like. How does Focal Stellia compare to the Focal Utopia, and how do they both handle vocals compared to some of the top-end planars? Utopia is a lot better, both tuning and technical. I mean, it's a closeback, right? Stellia is a high-end closeback, but it's, there's a lot of trade-offs when you close the back of the cup. And how are they some of the top end planars? Yeah, I think the Utopia is one of the best tuned headphones out there, but like the tuning, like for those high end headphones, right? You're talking about like other stuff that's like $4,000 plus, ridiculous price tags. Yeah, the Utopia is one of the best tuned ones out of that whole crowd, right? The other one that's really well tuned up there, like where I'd say like don't even bother EQing these, is like the Susvara, and maybe one of the HE1000s, not the SE. The SE was quite bright. I needed to EQ that. This is all in the ranking list. But yeah, the Utopia is more punchy than all those planars up there, but it is less detailed. That's how I would. Still very detailed though. It's just not as detailed as the Susvara or LCD5. Ever broken a set of high-end-ish headphones? No. How does HD660S have more detail with so much treble roll-off? You tell me, man. What is detail? No, like the problem, the R70X is just hazy and grainy, and like it's so obvious to me. I'm like, yeah, if you watch Metal 571's review on the R70X, that is super accurate. And when I listened to it, I was like, the tuning is outstanding, but it is a hazy, grainy, limited sounding. Whereas the HD660S doesn't have near the soundstage of the R70X, but it's clearly more incisive and detailed and separated. So, do you think the U6T is a straight upgrade over the Andromeda? I don't know about Andromeda S. But yes, I do think the U6T is a straight up, like, no question. U6T is absolutely better than Andromeda 2020. Do you find them good, and even the old one? Do you find them good for metal? I do indeed. They don't have as like they still have like upper mids and mids, but it's not like Moondrop level of upper mid, so it's not shouty, not significantly. Got a strong bass lift into the sub bass, and then there's a little bit of that upper treble zing as well. It's again not quite as refined as the U12T, but man, it is so nice and really good contrast and punch on those for BAs. Yeah. We'll go for another 15-20 minutes here, guys. So it is spicy take o'clock. Let's go. If you had one before, let's get them hot takes. Oh, okay, yeah. If you have a spicy take, throw in a pepper, like what Jake just did. Jesus. You guys are talking about the A90. I don't need to get into that. Okay, Jake. I don't think anyone talks about the fact that more detail does not necessarily mean more enjoyable, or the fact that the Sandara is already more detailed than most musicians' rigs. That's probably. I don't think that's a spicy take. I think that's a really solid take. So these guys claiming some high watt amplifier X added more slam to say HE1000 SE are just hearing a placebo effect. They're not volume matched. Not necessarily. I think there could be. So this is what I'm saying though, right? The point there that I was mentioning before is merely to say that if the frequency response is the same at out of a basically the frequency response won't change out of those amplifiers, right? But there are some where there's like an output impedance synergy that is boosting the bass. And people might not know about that. And then they're like, oh, it slams or whatever, right? Like not knowing that actually they're boosting the bass like crazy because of an output impedance thing, which happens a lot. Another thing could be a certain conservation of distortion characteristics. So by all accounts, the reports that you're seeing out there of people saying that this adds a lot more slam or whatever because it's a high-end amplifier, that could very much be true and not just be placebo. So don't mistake me for saying that it's all placebo there. I think they probably are having those experiences and they're reporting them genuinely. It's just that you can attribute those to things that are not... You can attribute those to more obvious things that I think maybe people realize. I do... To caveat that as well, I do think there are certain designs where it's like we don't know why that sounds as good as it so good. We don't know where it's not at all obvious. Why something ends up sounding great. The very fact that people enjoy tube amps, for example, right? When all of like the indication from various different places that are measuring amplifiers seems to be we should be chasing lower distortion. We should be elevated second and third harmonic distortion is undesirable, all this stuff. And yet tube amps are subjectively enjoyed by people, right? So there isn't one singular thing that says that all people will like, this. So, maybe there's trends, maybe we can look at the research that correlates distortion with preference and all this kind of stuff. There is a paper on that. But that doesn't mean basically that the people who are making these reports about various different things having an effect aren't genuinely experiencing that. Sandara better than HD600? I would take a Sandara over an HD600, yeah. Why is the HE580 better than HE1? Only see, you might have been able to make that assessment, but I haven't been able to. Yeah, here we go with the HD580 infinite scaling time. Some people get all into, crazy source equipment. But yeah, so like just to kind of wrap that topic up, I do think that sources make a difference. The problem is that we can't make confident judgments about them unless we're doing volume matched comparisons, right? Like up until then, everything else is just an impression. And so, I think it's important to take a lot of that with a grain of salt, that, maybe this experience this person had was due to a particular impedance relationship with the headphones that they were using with the amplifier or whatever. And then that explains it. Maybe not, but, just because they had that experience with it doesn't mean that it will in all cases. Jake, knows this as well. This really old cob knows this as well. It's not his name in here. He's talking about the Ferrum and Hypsos, right? It's like people say all kinds of crazy stuff about the synergy with that and the Susvara. I think that they do, right? But are they doing level meshed A/B comparisons? I don't know. Why are IEMs better than headphones? That's not they're not. There's an argument to say that some IEMs are better than some headphones. Yeah, like I would take a U6T over most closed-back headphones. DACs don't make too big of a difference. Could tell a difference between an MSB reference and a chord cutest. Could or couldn't. I don't think it's a spicy take. The DACs don't make a big of a difference. Once you have a good DAC, it's not a big difference going to another. It's a very small difference, if at all. Like blind test being difficult, not at all. Spicy take. Apple's Target is better than Harman Target. That is a spicy take. That is a spicy take. That's rough. Would you rather have a U6T or an Aeon 2 Noir? Whew, that is a tough question. Oh, man. I can see the case for both, right? I want like one or the other. I can see the case. You can make a good argument for either one. In some ways, my answer there is actually U6T. Why? Okay, so if we're talking strictly sound quality in a singular environment, there is a case for either, right? Like I could see the person going like, yeah, I really love the planar sound of the Aeon Noir. It's got a good frequency response. One of the best closed back headphones out there, right? It's fantastic. But at the same time, even though the Noir is portable, the U6T is more portable. The U6T fits into more places and is for the situation of going hiking or going wherever, right? The U6T is a headphone I take with me. Or I would if but you know what I mean, right? Like you can take it to more places. And so the at-home listening, if you're in a quiet room and you don't need a closed back headphone and you can go with open back headphones, right? That opens the door to many possibilities. Whereas the convenience of a closed back, you can also get that convenience from an IEM. But that's a good question. Headphi and ASR simps are as cringy as each other. I don't know if that's a spicy take. I don't know if, like, to a certain degree, that statement is like you're saying basically people on the internet in information silos are cringy. And to that, you can find that anywhere. But maybe the take maybe the spicy part is you're making an equivalence for the cringiness of ASR simps and headfires, and yeah, to a certain extent that's I don't know if that's a spicy take. I could see an argument for that. Here's another one. L-shaped jacks on over-ears are idiotic because it's harder to plug into an amp and route the cable to your desk. Straight jack OP. That's not a spicy take. I also don't like L-shaped jacks. Listening to the same track on Phonitor XE and Ferrum Ur Hypsos, both solid state rigs, is like listening to two different masters of the same song. That's a spicy take. Actually, you know, depending on the headphones that you have there, I can see that. Yeah. Yeah. HM1 servo or pure Class A. There's two. You have both modes. Oh, Class A with servo. Yeah, that's not a spicy take. Spicy takes as far as boring. Yeah, yeah. No, actually, I see. I know why you're saying that, right? It's like one of those things where it's like, you know, myself and a number of other folks who are, let's say, audiophiles, right? Like, of course, we chase like normal but really good normal, right? And there's a sense in which people who are maybe spending a ton of money, and maybe this is why there's more kind of weird frequency responses and tunings out there at the high end, maybe they're not looking for normal. Maybe they're looking for something more flavored or colored or esoteric or weird, right? They want something that's more of a science experiment that makes sound, right? Whereas for me, like I just want music to sound as natural as possibly can, or like as realistic and as clear as possible. And to me, that's best achieved with those more normal tonal balances. But I can kind of see why you'd say that, and it is a spicy take for sure. What's your favorite headphone to watch Morbius with? I don't know what Morbius is. What is Morbius? LCDR is more fun. Oof. You probably are having more fun with it with different amplifiers, because I only really got a chance to try it off of the Jot A or whatever it was, which was, that experience was nothing. It was fine, but nothing special. And I think that, you know, that's one where like source memeing is probably a requirement. Spicy take. Blessing to Dusk needs EQ. That is a spicy take. Who is Jake? You know. Sundar is better than HD6XX when cost is factored in, i.e. bang for the buck. I think so. Sundar's down to $300 now. That is crazy. That's probably one of the best values, bang for the bucks in audio. You just need to already have an amplifier. I guess if you have an HD6XX, you also already have an amplifier. Josh Valor's latest video of the Synxer SA1 is the worst review I've ever had the displeasure to watch. His just fancy spec reader. I haven't seen it, so I cannot comment on that. I am curious about the Synxer stuff, though. I'd like to try that because people talk about that. Like, I'm on record for saying that the Rebel amp destroys the A90. And I'm very much committed to that opinion. You know, and you know, for all the comments that I made about like source equipment not being a big deal, there's still a difference. Like, that difference was still tangible to me. And maybe so people talk about the Synxer in that same breath, so that's why I'm curious about that one. Your spicy take is that $15 IEMs sound as good as $2,000 IEMs. You don't care about IEMs because comfort issues. See, this is what I was talking about before. I don't think that $15. I mean, there are many $2,000 IEMs that are also not good, right? That's the other thing. You gotta go for the good ones, U12T. But yeah, there are tons of people who just don't bother with IEMs. Spicy take. Oh Jesus. Okay, I am doing the full color radiance out of my Amsterdam Mogwai SE out of the 8 ohm. That's a great. That would be a man. Nailing it. Sounds super enjoyable and less fatiguing for EDM. My audiophile friends say they would not use a tube amp for specifically EDM. I think it's fine. That's a great combo because it's already bassy, and you're not going with the higher output impedance version of that, like the 32 ohm out, which would make it like way too bait, like it would make it muddy, I think. So that, I think you've done the right choice with that. Yeah, that's also what I would recommend to people who were like, they want like the Mogwai SE. Well, okay, I don't know about the Mogwai, but the Forge makes many headphones very contrasty and very intense sounding. And that's even with a low output impedance tab. Like, well, say low, it's like 8, right? So that's one of those where it's like maybe there's some conservation of distortion products that's leading to that effect, potentially. I'm not saying that's why, but potentially, because it's not like those headphones are difficult to drive, like, at all. Audiophilia begins when you can't stop and just greed, gluttony, and lust. What? How about that? Why does the Stealth fold up and act portable when sensitivity suggests it needs a desktop chain? I mean, that's the same with, like the Noir and some of the other ones as well. They are portable, but they also need power, right? Or benefit from power. There are devices, though. They're portable devices that can power it. It's just that you're probably not getting the most out of it unless you have like a proper, setup. Resolve, what's your spiciest take? By the way, do you see? I was showing this off earlier, the picture. Oh, there. As I was saying before, everybody go follow Golden Sound's channel, and big thanks to Golden for the picture there, which is awesome. If you hadn't seen it before, let me focus on it. Oh no, it's focusing on my face. Get out of the frame. There we go. Isn't that cool? That's so dope. I love it. Okay, let's keep going. LJACs are better for desktop use than portable because they let you route the cable around the keyboard easier. That's a good one. Oh, here we go. D8000 Pro is better than the Susvara. That is a spicy take. I mean, yeah, some people like it. I can see it. Sus isn't boring because of tonality. It's boring because it's so damn smooth all the time. That energy is next to impossible to achieve. Horns, woodwind sound bland and fake on the Susvara. Smoothness being smoothness. I mean, you mean because it's not like particularly contrasty, right? I can see that. I mean, to me, I care more about that tonal balance and the refinement and the detail and the separation. But some people prefer that, punch and the contrast and sort of liveliness that you get from a Focal Utopia, for example. In which case, yeah, I would agree that Utopia has more of that. I think that's what you're getting at, right? Less about the tonal balance, more about the sort of, visceral physicality of the thing. Yeah, I can get behind that. Spicy take. Non-phaser LCDs are better than phaser LCDs. I haven't had that much chance to try that, but certainly better than the memory foam ones, which were phaser, if I remember correctly. Xbox is deliberately holding back audio by supporting only licensed product over USB, not UIC2. I don't know enough about that. U12T has shouty upper mids and is very overhyped. Had to sell it. Yeah, that is a spicy take. That is. It's funny because you look at the frequency response. U12T categorically does not have shouty upper mids. That is. I mean, I can't imagine how you would find like a Moontrop S8. that would be just like a hard nope. Like U12T is specifically relaxed there. Beyerdynamic DT240 Pro is Beyerdynamic's best pair of headphones. And it's under $100. You won't find me arguing. Although I haven't, I have not tried those. I did try them like a long time ago, but yeah, I don't have a current up-to-date opinion on any of that stuff. Need to do more on tube amps and headphones. Yeah, we're doing more tube amp stuff here in the near future. We've got some collab amps with Justin. So there's the Forge, and then there's the Lilu, which is the Pendant. So Pendant SE basically got reintroduced as the Lilu. It was the Lilu originally. Then when ZMF took it over, it was the Pendant. Then they did a revision to the Pendant SE, and now it's the Lilu again. but there's been some improvements from the Pendant SE as well. So they added speaker taps, and I think they increased the power supply, and redesigned the choke and did a bunch of other stuff. So the it's even lower noise floor now than it was before. But the thing is, like, those are collab amplifiers, so I can give like an overview of them. I can describe them, but I don't want to do anything evaluative. I would rather send that out to people who are, like, basically community members and people to do, like, reviews on it, because as much as, like, I don't get a cut of any of that stuff, it's still a collab amp, and we wouldn't have done it if we didn't think that Justin was awesome, was an awesome dude, and makes good stuff, right? Like, otherwise what would be the point? So it's a bit like begging the question, right? Like, if you do a review or if you do evaluative stuff on a collab product, even if there's no conflict of interest. Spicy take. FOMO is about 90% of the whole hobby. Yeah. Utopia also sucks. Ideal is sus and some more energy. That is a spicy take. Although not the second half. I agree that sus. Like, I want to hear this as far off that Zal HM1, man. Like, that is. I'm so curious to try that at some point. Because, like, we were listening to the Noir, and, like, that is the best I've ever heard the Noir. And that's not on the level of the Susvara, right? So, yeah. How is the chip shortage affecting the audio industry? You still have to tell me whose video that was that said that I was previously working as a sea lion tamer. It's probably affected it, yeah. I think it's not just chip shortage, it's like everything, supply chains, all that stuff. Spicy take. Some reviewers are more about affiliate links than the actual review. Yeah. Yes, they are. I think that, like, as much as affiliate links are not, they are, like, just because somebody uses affiliate links doesn't entail that they are going to be, chilling it. Like, you watch, like, Bad Seed Tech's stuff, for example, right? He's very, he's very direct about that stuff and is perfectly happy to, put out opinions that compete with his affiliate incentives, right? But I do also think that the affiliate model is the fact that it is so prevalent in YouTube, and people need to do that in order to, like, make any of this sort of content stuff work, is I think it is killing the platform. I mean, along with some of the crazy decisions that YouTube has made, like removing the dislike counter. But it's like, for the same reason that, like, do you watch regular television? I certainly don't. I mean, maybe people do, but, like, I certainly don't I don't watch any. I don't have cable, right? Like, I mean, I wouldn't choose to have it. It's there's nothing there that is of interest to me, and it's partially because of all the crazy advertising that's there. And as soon as we build in, like, as soon as we normalize that on these platforms, it's gonna kill the platforms too. There's already ad blockers, which is great, and now there's also sponsor read blockers, because it's just, that's another one. I'm not saying it's bad to do. Like, you got to be able to pay for stuff. You got to be able to monetize. But the affiliate thing is making it more and more difficult to actually get useful stuff out of this platform. Not that everybody who's doing it, isn't providing useful stuff. Just that it makes it more difficult as a trend. What's my personal spiciest take? I did one in last week's live stream, which, I mean, I don't think it's a spicy take, but it probably is, and it's that I think that the biggest incentive to overhype something or to not give out not represent accurate information is purchase justification and purchase and like confirmation bias. I mean, I guess that confirmation bias shows up everywhere. Like it shows up in purchase justification, but it also shows up in measurement justification. Like if you see a measurement that is very target adherent, you go, oh yeah, I know that's better. It must sound better to me. You know, not being honest with oneself and going, does this actually sound the way I wanted it to sound? Spicy take here is you need to run the KSC 775 balanced on the 10K amp to fully appreciate it. That's awesome. Yeah, I want to do that actually. We have the EF1000 in the studio, and that's like 15 grand. So I could yeah, maybe hook up some KC75s. We ran the purple unicorn off of it. Spicy take, Hi-Fi Man can't tune. Their only listenable headphone is the Sundara. All their other stuff sounds thin and harsh without EQ. LCD2 is tuned better than the Ananda. Yeah, that is the spicy take. It's funny because most people would say that, you know, it's the opposite. Like, you know, the best tuned planers are the Hi-Fi Man ones typically, and that Odysseys are great for their technical qualities, but they all need EQ. That's why that narrative exists. So I see why you put this as a spicy take, and that is a spicy take. Yeah. Everything EQ'd is lo-fi. Yeah, I mean, like I also, if you haven't seen it yet, that video that we did on the limits of EQ, kind of goes into like basically where EQ should stop, right? And for me, it's like the best products are the ones where all I have to do is add a bass shelf, for example. So that's why I'm really into headphones like the Sundara, where that's literally all I would do. I mean, maybe some just other tiny little things in the upper mids, maybe, but like for the most part, it's just adding a bass shelf. Sysvara is another one that's kind of like that, you know, just adding a bass shelf. LCD5, I think you can put a little bit more scrutiny on that one because it's a little bit more than just that, but it is so much better to EQ that than it was the memory foam, you know, the previous stuff, or the LCD4. So but yeah, everything not EQ'd. I mean, I think there's all kinds of stuff that sounds great without EQ, and it is my personal preference to go for things that are either I don't bother with it, or I don't really do much. So like this one, the HE6 right now, I actually do EQ it. Let me just I'm on the wrong EQ for it. But yeah, I have like maybe 3 or 4 filters for this one. So even this, which is a headphone that I love, this is like a legendary headphone. And I'm using pads that already improve the frequency response. Even still, I EQ it. Because it's to get it to be to my preference, right? Like, why wouldn't I? Sundara versus HE600, who you got? Yeah, I could see arguments for both. I prefer Sundara. Using viewer-driven Patreon float plane to buy units for reviews, the only sustainable and ethical review model. Also relying on manufacturers to send units, by definition not ethically sustainable. I don't know. I think those models are good, let me be clear, and better than affiliate link farming. But it is also very difficult to do that if you're trying to do this on your own. So that's why people will resort to, like, for example, the thing I was talking about last time with the Best, we got, contacted by Best Buy, right? And to try and to get us to do XM5 review, and they were offering to pay us a certain amount, give us commission, and also we had to comply with their their rules, right? Which it's like if I, to try and do this professionally and you get an offer like that, it's so compelling, to be like, yeah, okay, this is how I eat. Let me navigate. Let me try and do a bunch of mental gymnastics to navigate this, to try and, right? But I think that practice really kills the goose that lays the golden egg for everybody else. And it's not just in headphones. It's in like everything. It's in cameras. It's in GPUs. It's in laptops, watches, whatever. Live stream on analytic philosophy. That would be fun. I think that's a little bit punitive, though. I'll punish you with philosophy. If it's not good at 50 dB, it's not good. Like 50 dB overall. Q-tips feel awesome. Oh my god. Actually, yeah, it's probably worth it for people to clean their ears more frequently. But no, I have a better way than with Q-tips. There's like this, I can't remember what it's called. It's basically like earwax softener. You can just put it in your ear at night, and then you take a shower in the morning, and then it's out. Here we go. Here's the spicy take. Odyssey Tunes headphones so shitty, mixes from the 80s sound listenable. Hadn't thought about that. They are very much trying to do the pro audience thing, but I know that they also brought in some engineers. Like I know they brought in Bobcats to do some of the tuning, or have some of the tuning stuff going on. Also with their DSP stuff, right? But yeah, I think they did a good thing with the the LCDX 2021, because to me that really was a lot more in line with more normal tunings. But even the 5 and the Carbon they're so opposite from what the older tunings used to be. I think they went a little too far, but it's nice to see that they have ear gain now, at least. HE6's Vara and K371 are the only headphones not requiring EQ. I just said, I guess not requiring. Okay, fair. I would go further than that, though. I would say the Sundara. I would say, to a certain extent, HD600. I mean, yeah, even still EQ that. I don't really EQ the Utopia, to be honest. I don't EQ the Allure with Utopia pads off of the 32 ohm out of the Kenzie, but that's cheating. Oh, here we go. Spicy take. Headphones should measure flat and raw. That's not even a spicy take. That's just like categorically false. You're just coming up with bad takes now for no reason. I know your take on this, but from memory, Goldentown doesn't like to EQ because he claims exclusive mode sounds better to him. On which player, though? On Rune? I don't know. I honestly haven't gotten into that stuff. So, because I'm pretty sure he's not using Tidal, and there was an issue with Tidal, and I forget what it is, but there was an issue with Tidal and exclusive mode. But with Rune, I think if you use exclusive mode, you still use their EQ, I think. I could be wrong about that. But just, like, to me, EQ and exclusive mode are not totally incompatible. Unless I misunderstood what you're saying here. You can use EQ using something like Rune and still have exclusive mode. There you go. Yeah, exactly. EQ APO that forces you into use not exclusive mode. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Is the DCA stealth that much of a letdown? Why do all charts seem amazing on this thing but not universally loved? I think it's because, or at least in part, because of the coupling differences on actual human heads, where the wearing situation might not be the same as what it is on the rig, and it shifts depending on the wearing situation. That, for starters, I think is key. So, like, for me, it ends up being a little bit too much in the upper mids, right? The other aspect is if you wear glasses, so the resonance frequency on the Stealth and all those DCA headphones is quite high because they're smaller, lighter, more comfortable, etc. So the drivers are not that big, and at least compared to Hi-Fi Man or Odyssey drivers, so in order to get the bass extension, you depend on coupling, and so if you have glasses like with really thick arms, that for whatever reason break the seal, you're going to lose bass as well. And so I think that there's some of these more positional related things that affect the way people hear it in practice. And then there's also the question about dynamics and all that stuff, which, yeah, I mean, I think you guys know my take on that. But nobody knows how to measure that, right? Like, so that's why it's a difficult thing to, point out. Let's see. I keep my Verite open. Why would I sell it? I just EQ it. Oh yeah, EQ APO will have a negative impact on sound quality due to the audio stream being forced through the Windows mixer. This alters audio and is not bit perfect. How much of an impact it has is situational, but it's never ideal. Yeah, so to me on that, it's like if any of that digital stuff has a negative effect on the sound quality, I mean, never mind the fact that I don't recommend using EQ profiles to begin with. I recommend adding, going for headphones where your EQ doesn't have to be, significant. But beyond that, to me, it's kind of like what Blaine talked about in the when he raised the giant rampaging gorilla analogy, which is that if the frequency response is well, I won't use that analogy, but basically the lesser of two evils is to improve the frequency response with EQ, right? You end up with a better overall result, even though maybe there's some stuff that is degraded as a result of anything going on digitally, right? At least that's my take. I'm happy to have disagreement on that. Oh, Jake. I'm sorry. That is the worst take of today. Come on, man. The new Batman movie was amazing. It was so good I want to watch it again. Dynamics is just a slight bit boost to mid bass and treble. That's false. That is demonstrably false, actually, because that exists in all of the close-back DCAs, right? I mean, the Noir is a perfect example of that, and is the absence of dynamics as well, So, this is a great topic, right? Like, just because we can correlate certain things with certain examples of headphones doesn't mean that what we've seen as that correlation is responsible for what we hear. There could be other things that are responsible, and those groupings just happen to make sense. But all the time I see people being like, oh yeah, you just have this perception because of X reason. And it's like, you don't know that. It's why I often bring up, and somebody's going to get this, but I often bring up the the Gettier case examples where people can be right about something for the wrong reasons, and then but the problem that we see in audio a lot is that people will then use those wrong reasons to attribute or predict something else and end up with the wrong answer. You know. So, you know, the classic example is of, you know, barn facades. Well, I did that one before, but there's another one with pocket change, where basically the only reason why you got the answer right was because you guessed about something for the wrong, like you made an assumption that was based on false information or like the wrong information, but you just happened to get it right. Right? That happens all the time. In audio as well. Well, not just in audio, but just like all the time. And then we'll use that. Like I've seen presentations where people use that, you know, the wrong reason for something to make a statement about something else and predict something else when that's not true. So we have to be far more careful. Yeah, Noir definitely has a treble boost in the upper treble. Let's see. Planar headphones have an odd decay character to it, so that it cannot beat dynamic driver headphones by timbre quality. I don't know if decay and timbre are as related as we think it is here. But I do know what you mean. I do think that planars are identifiable and recognizable as are dynamic driver headphones, right? Like from one another. They do sound different to me. You know, even if I EQ them to the same thing, they sound different to me. So maybe there is something there that is, you know, uniquely planar. Set up a voting tip jar where people can vote for headphones to buy and review. Yeah, that's a good idea, actually. Maybe we'll do that with a forum. Maybe we'll do that with a forum. Listening to your headphones drunk gives plus 20% detail but minus 30% poison resistance. That's amazing. Not using EQ is a sign of laziness. But I also am lazy. Yeah, actually, the whole EQ question is a very interesting one, right? With the new harmonic dyne G200, which is, I'll do a review on that, right? People are asking about that one before. That's a headphone where they're using a driver that is basically an Odyssey, you know, style driver, right? It's a very similar driver. It's, you know, the M1060, M1060C stuff, or platform, let's say, because I can't verify that it's actually the same driver. It also doesn't have the issues that driver had. At least not in this one that I'm evaluating. It looks much more normal, at least in all the different behavior, right? Like all the potential non-minimum phase stuff. I didn't see anything that would indicate that on this one. But the tuning of that headphone, the G200, is very not good. Like it is a no ear gain kind of thing, right? Just, I mean, the treble is good. I'll give it that. The treble is good. A little bit, maybe just a little bit spicy in the treble, but for the most part, it's good. But it's the mids and bass. It's just this muffled, veiled kind of thing, right? Same kind of tuning as the older Odysseys. Now, my take on that is, if we're going to give the Odysseys a pass, the older ones, right, for having really good technical performance, just that they need, you know, just that they're good value with EQ, for example, right? Like they're the best sounding headphones at a given price. Just that the caveat that you need to EQ them to get them there, right? Because they have all this amazing subjective technical performance. I think we need to give that same judgment about this thing, about the G200, where it is very detailed. It is, there's no question that it is. I mean, I'm not going to say it's on the level of LCD-X, but it's very good, right? I haven't A B compared them, but you know what I mean, right? Like it is at the price point it's at. It's very competitive for technical qualities. It's just that the tonality is just not good. But I think we can't have double standards about this kind of stuff, right? We have to say, okay, well, we had this judgment before about the Odysseys, that they needed EQ, and that with EQ you could gain a lot. You could get sound quality that ordinarily you couldn't get at that price. I kind of think the same is true about this thing, right? It's just that EQ is EQ is the tool that allows that to happen. And if people are like, yeah, I'm not comfortable doing EQ, EQ is the devil, then don't buy it. Like, just straight up, then just don't bother. Get something else. You guys are all deleting your messages. Where's I can't see the other one. Okay, using EQ makes me feel I removed the identity of my headphone. That is probably true. Yeah, I think that's true to a certain extent. Yeah, that's another reason not to do it, right? Like, and in many ways, I said this before, but the hobby gets a lot more fun when you don't, because you have like all kinds of like if you just make a rule like I'm never going to bother EQing, then suddenly every headphone's tuning matters so much more because you just wouldn't change anything. And then it also means that you can apply much easier scrutiny to those things, right? Where you're like, well, I'm not going to change anything about this, and therefore this headphone isn't good for these reasons, right? You can be I guess here goes that word again. You can index way harder on that stuff as far as what matters to you personally. And if that were me, like if I were going to like say I'm never going to EQ something to maintain or retain the identity or that sort of uniqueness quality of every headphone, I would have a very hard time recommending anything. Because I'm picky, right? I would probably I would Sundara and quit, like, or like I probably wouldn't even recommend the HE6, but I love this headphone. It's a fantastic headphone. If I couldn't EQ. But that's why, when people, I feel sometimes like when I do reviews, I'll go through the objective stuff first, and then I'll go through the subjective stuff, and I'll talk about things like detail and resolution. There are people who just only care about that, and they're like, I don't care that the tonality is a dog's breakfast. I only care about whether or not it's detailed. And I think to myself, like, that is crazy. Like, there's so many headphones out there that it's just like not even remotely close for their tuning, but are amazing at it's a G200 thing is a good example, and I index that word so much harder on tonal balance than I do on anything else. I kind of always give Odyssey stuff a pass for using EQ because they have their Rune integration and Reveal plugin, so it's easy. I almost feel like it's just part of the product. Yeah. Although their Rune integrations weren't always up to date, I hope they've updated them, because they had the memory foam ones, and then they had the non-memory foam, and then there's the pre-memory foam, and so sometimes they didn't apply correctly, right? But yeah, I agree with that. But for other headphones, once you start including EQ in the review, the possibilities and variations are just too many. Yeah, and I kind of agree with that as well. Like I think I said this in my limitations of EQ video as well, that like the way that EQ factors into my evaluations is that it's fine for headphones to have a certain flavor, but I like in any evaluation, like I don't think we should expect the end user, like we shouldn't expect the person who buys the headphone to have to EQ, right? Like it doesn't need to match the target. It doesn't need to perfectly be, at the target, but it needs to just be reasonably balanced for fundamental and harmonic and not sound wrong. And so that's really, for me, where the delineation is between, like, EQ, if you want, right, to your preference, do whatever you want. But headphones where you have to EQ them are going to be far more deserving of scrutiny than ones where it's just like, yeah, add a flavor, add a bass shelf if you want more bass, for example, right? It's a totally different kind of thing. And to me, that's why, like, I think those Odyssey headphones, as much as, I mean, yeah, like there is that element of they do the Rune thing with their presets and all that stuff, and they have Reveal Plus. I still think that their tunings are absolutely deserving of scrutiny. Like, like you shouldn't feel that you shouldn't have to EQ something that costs, many thousands of dollars. I think the same is true of a lot of those other high-end headphones as well, where, they've done something, they've gone for broke with something, but not necessarily on making things sound natural. EQ steals the headphones. Steals it. Yeah, I think you're right. I would say the same thing, right? I just think that in many cases the identity is bad. Also, if you guys haven't seen that limits of EQ video, you probably should, because that goes into, like, I do not recommend EQing things to Harman. You should not, like, don't do what people in ASR are doing. That's like completely missing the forest for the trees. Yeah, as Golden says, not really a fan of EQing stuff to Harman. I also don't recommend doing that. I don't recommend using EQ profiles. I recommend learning how to do it yourself if you want to, and making those adjustments to your own preference, to what you like. You can use the graph to be like, oh, this is a major problem, I should probably address that. But use your ears when you're doing that, And buy headphones, or go with headphones where you don't really need to do that much, right? Or it's not super wonky. Since my review of the QLux 5K, it's been constantly out of stock. I think other people reviewed it as well and said it was awesome. This thing is so dope. But yeah, I also don't recommend the auto EQ thing, to be honest. It's all right, hold on. This doesn't make sense. Harman is both too shouty and too bassy. V-shaped mess. I don't think you can. I think those are somewhat incompatible. V-shaped, and also that would be like W-shaped. You're saying there's too much treble, there's too much bass, and too much mids. So the problem with that statement, not to pick on you or anything, but Harman, when people criticize Harman and they're criticizing the shape of the upper mids, right, that rise into up to 3K and then goes down, that's basically criticizing the way that your ears impact incoming sound, right? Because that part of Harman is actually not really the defining part, right? That part is just based on summed DF and free field HRTFs, and then smoothed, to 1/3. So that's why it's not as extreme as what an actual HRTF would look like. An actual HRTF has way more upper mids, but when you smooth it, to that degree, you lose a bit of it. Yeah. The defining characteristics of Harman is is basically the preference shelving, right? Which is 2.5K and above, and below 150 hertz. And the rest is based on like what your ear does. So so that part I don't think it should be really, like, that part I don't think is really worth scrutinizing, like, because the alternatives are way more ear gain. Like that is a much lesser version of ear gain than what your anatomy is actually doing. And the reason for that is because that's how people want their music to sound. They don't want it to be so clear and aggressive sounding. Now, my contention as well, though, is that it's not about level of ear gain so much as it's about the relationship between upper mids and treble that needs to be intact. That's going to affect whether or not something is shouty. Yeah, obviously within reason. Like, level still matters, but like as long as the level is somewhat roughly where your ear gain naturally is, then it's about the relationship between upper mids and treble. And if you have, like, if your treble is, if the balance is in favor of the upper mids, that's going to sound shouty. You can fix that by boosting the treble to a certain degree. Because that's all about the relationship between fundamental and harmonics with one another when you're listening to music, tones that token those frequencies. It's not that Harman itself is a problem, just that EQing stuff to Harman is not as straightforward as people think and has some serious issues. Exactly. Completely agree. That's the problem. It's people will try and EQ to match the target when they really shouldn't be, like above 5K. Like, that's, look at features of any actual HRTF. You know, even within Harman research, it's like you should base it on, like, the very fact that there's that the segmentation paper goes through, like, you know, shows all the different clustering and all that stuff. It does the cluster analysis. That should indicate that you should not be basing it on what, you know, what's not going to sound wrong to most people, but rather what's ideally optimal for you. Resolve is rapidly evolving into a hardcore anti-EQist. No, I'm not anti-EQ. I think EQ is, like, it's a necessary crutch, right? It is a thing that I have to do because I'm picky, but I'd rather not, you know. We shouldn't expect people to have to EQ headphones. No, I agree with that, but many reviewers, yourself included, recommend headphones that you yourself state need EQ. But that's because, well, the key thing there is need, right? I think, so the fact that I EQ just about every headphone doesn't mean that I think those headphones need EQ, right? If you look at my ranking list there in the thing, the majority of them are ones where, well, I would say none of them that are in the top tier or in the most recommended. None of them are headphones that need EQ. I mean, maybe there's an LCD4. I don't know if that's in the top tier. But there's also a no EQ tier as well, because I completely agree. You shouldn't, we shouldn't expect people to EQ things. So, it's almost like I find myself doing sometimes evaluations that are like, all right, let's get to the point of recommendation, right? For the person who doesn't EQ headphones, don't bother with this one, right? But for the person who does, sure. But then it's like, that requires so much more explanation and nuance, because as we've been talking about, it's like, it's not as simple as just saying EQ it to your heart's content and make it sound good, right? Because there are serious limitations to what you can do with EQ. Not literally the comment right after that one. Not using EQ is like not treating a room for speakers. I mean, it's a little different, but it's like not treating. If you imagine your ear gain as like room gain, yeah, I can see what you're saying. The top of the ear gain of an HD. We'll go for like 2 more minutes here, guys. The top of, because it's almost 2.5 hours, and I gotta get on with the day. The top of the ear gain on an HD600 is pretty close to the raw speaker measurement that Harman used, but the final smooth target is a bit lower there. Yeah, it's because it's smooth. If you do the smoothing, it actually, like, things on top and bottom, things that are, I don't know, that doesn't mean anything. Okay, things on either side would get smaller, right? Like if you have if parts of the frequency response are like high and the parts are low, when you smooth, both the high and the low kind of, they get close. Like if you smoothed it to an extreme level, right, it'll remove those features, and that's why it's lower. So in practice, like an unsmoothed version of that would have higher ear gain. Also, though, factoring in that 2.5K is where the adjustment. I think someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember reading in one of the papers that 2.5K was where one of the shelving filters was. Um, no, I appreciate that, Justin. And I agree with much of what you said about like not like we shouldn't expect people to EQ to have to EQ. I think for me the thing with Odyssey is like there's that was like it's such a like an iconic thing where they have, not in all cases but in many of their high end headphones, they have such amazing technical performance that it almost feels like a shame to kind of write them off for having a weird total balance. I think that's probably where a lot of that desire comes from. You're like, oh man, but I like this about it, and I want to see what it can do, right? Keeping in mind that they can also be, you can do whatever you want with those. They do not have, like, they don't have any issues with distortion or anything like that. Spicy take for Andrew or Golden. Which headphone sounds worse with Oratory 1999's worse with Oratory's Harman Target than without? You mean like strictly applied or his actual EQ adjustments? Because from what I understand, the way he does it is he's actually much more careful than just slapping on the target. Right? If you're going to go with the profile, I do recommend oratories, right? I just don't recommend doing... I don't recommend fire and forgetting profiles. I recommend, sure, put on a profile, but then use your ears and see what you need to adjust further. Because, you probably will. Yeah, so like, I'm not going to say like HD650, for example, because I don't think he actually... I could be wrong about this, but like I don't think he perfectly matches the target there, or like certain headphones where it's just like that doesn't make sense to do because it can't handle it because of distortion in the bass or whatever. I remember him saying something along those lines of like it being not great. It doesn't respond well to EQ because of its own driver limitations, and I imagine because of that, it wouldn't be perfectly matching it, but. So yeah, if you did perfectly match it, maybe that would be a problem. Yeah, like what Catalysis says with the presets. He says, I find them helpful as a starting point. I personally remove like half the bands and just tweak some of the major lifts and pullbacks with my ears. That's basically what you should be doing, is doing this stuff by ear, because otherwise it is, as I said in that limits of EQ video, like it's like doing surgery with a blunt instrument. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for the live stream. Thank you so much for all your spicy takes. You guys are all awesome. Big thanks to Golden once again for being here, and thanks of course for this. That's the dopest thing. I hope to have Golden on the live stream at some point in the near future here. But also to all of you guys for participating, the usual folks. You guys know who you are. As usual, for any of the measurement stuff down in the description, as well as additional written review coverage of all kinds of stuff up on headphones.com. Check out the review section and guides and all that stuff. And I will see you guys in the next video, which hopefully will be next week. But other than that, have a good weekend, everybody.